T minus 1 minute. T minus 50 seconds. T minus 40 seconds. T minus 30 seconds. T minus 20 seconds. Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hey everyone.
Hello.
Hey, I think we've got people here already.
How you doing? Great. Hi everyone. Welcome.
This is the second part of the Women in Music series, brought to you by Adam Audio and B-Side Project and Music Tech Magazine. I am Miss Shivers from the B-Side Project, and I'm very pleased to be joined by Jane Arnison from Adam Audio.
Hello everyone. How's it going? Hey Vet.
Hey, we've it's been great planning this, isn't it? It's been a long time planning, and the series, the first session last week was amazing, with Anna and with Sarah. And
yeah, it was awesome.
It was brilliant. I'm looking forward to your mixing session now. We're going from the 6-part series. This is part 2. It's going from start to finish, for women in the music industry, by women in the music industry, but of course chaps can join in as well. It's to encourage everyone to get involved in the music industry and to really delve into those subjects that aren't really discussed in detail that much. We've got an hour, just over an hour and a half today, and yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing what you've got to say, Jane. So you're Adam Audio's product specialist.
I am, yeah, at the moment, kind of freelance vibes at the moment, and I kind of juggle that with a bunch of other things that I do as well.
So I know you do Pathwaves, which is really interesting.
Yeah, Pathwaves, I started it last year, and it's the idea. It started as just a 1-week camp. We did it at Rebel Studios in Berlin, and it's an opportunity for female and gender non-conforming producers and engineers to have more opportunities to work in professional environments and to have professional pressure and to work with analog gear and stuff like that, to try and address the fact that there are 2% of producers are registered as female. So it's a big thing that we need to work on.
That's crazy. 2%. That is crazy.
Yeah. It's a Billboard stats from last year.
How do we know that? How do we know it's 2%? Where do producers register?
Well, I mean, you can register. It's basically, it would be through Performing Rights Association. So the royalties that you get paid. So all the payouts. This is one of the other things, in times like COVID and everything, who's getting, royalties and stuff for keeping people alive. And this is another important area where we need to redress pay, so
yeah,
women and minorities need to get more access. Yeah.
That's another topic in itself, isn't it? PRS is the UK one and ASCAP's the American one. And yeah, exactly. Yeah. Anyway, we'll leave that for another session. So
yeah, totally. So anyone who's listening, if you don't know about Pathwaves, pathwaves.de, check it out. We've got an event we're planning at the moment, and I'd love to have many of you apply. So check it out.
We'll put that in the comments as well on YouTube and on Facebook, so people can find the link either during this session or afterwards. And just to remind everyone, we've got a competition running as well. That's the link is going to go up on the comments on both YouTube and Facebook, and to win some awesome software. And there'll be a draw every session to win some amazing software, but also there'll be a final draw just after our last session to win some amazing monitors as well from Adam Audio. So make sure you enter that, and you'll be in for a chance of winning one of 6 prizes.
Nice.
Cool. Yeah.
Now I feel like I'm noticing some sneaky. What's in the background of your?
Sorry, my fingers.
Yeah, that's hard to get it right. They look to me suspiciously like S2Vs. I think is that right?
They are, and I'm just practicing with them in a minute, so they are awesome.
Nice.
I think the products that we're giving away in the Adam Audio competition are what are they?
They're the T8Vs.
T8Vs, that's the one.
Yeah.
So confused
It's really nice bass response, everyone.
What would you say about the T8Vs? Are they good?
Yeah, they're great. They're really good entry level monitor. They're priced really competitively, and the 8 which we just released has like mega bass response. So all of the bass heads, bass music, yeah, that's the way to go.
Bass, dirty bass.
Yes.
So we've got so many people joining us now. I can see all there. Welcome to everyone from pretty much across the globe. It's awesome. And I'm now going to pass you over to Jane, who's going to go through mixing your track. We will be answering questions as we go through. So Jane's going to highlight some questions that she likes, and then we'll pop them up, and then we'll have a full-on Q&A at the end.
Cool.
So I'll just pass you over now.
Great. Okay, everyone. So I would really encourage you to ask questions, first of all, because I like interactivity and I feel a little lonely here in the Adam HQ studios. So if you can make me feel like we're in the same room, I think that'd be really fun. And also, hey, Sarah from London, what's up? I also would, I'm here for you. So I have a plan that I'd really like to answer your questions. That's what we're here for. I have kind of 8 sections, and I'll answer some questions as we go through that. But also we'll have like a good time for questions at the end. So let's get into it. Now, I've got to say, I think it might be the heat or maybe Mercury's in retrograde or something, but my computer's being a little bit annoying today. So we'll just have to be a bit patient with it, but hopefully it won't be too big of a drama. Let's crack on. So, I mean, just kind of giving a little bit more info. Do you see that now? Hopefully you can see that. I can't see you or any questions at the moment, so I'm just going to vamp for a bit. So what I set up today is, it's, as you can see, it's called 8 tips to help you mix better. So I'm kind of assuming that you've tried some mixes. I don't really know the level that we have here today, so I imagine it's quite a broad range. So I've tried to kind of think of tips. Some of them might be really obvious to some of you more advanced mixers, but I've also got some challenging little bits and pieces in there to push those of you who are at a more kind of intermediate or advanced stage, to push you further. So hopefully there's something in here for everyone today. Yeah, just to give you a bit more about me, I'm a composer, a producer, and of course a mix engineer. I'm the Adam Audio Product Specialist. I'm also an education specialist. I run the production course at BIM Berlin, and as I've already talked about, Pathwaves. And beyond all of that, I also have an awesome band called Evol. So check it out. Check us out on Spotify. Cool. Okay, so let's get cracking. So I said 8 tips to help you mix better, right? So these are the 8 tips. 1, get into a mixing mindset. 2, consider your workflow. 3, think about how you're processing sounds. Don't just do it automatically. 4, what is all the fuss about with routing? 5, EQ tips. 6, compression tips. 7, spatialization tips. And 8, thinking about story and narrative and building tension within the mix. So that's it. No, joking. So let's get started on the first one. Getting into a mixing mindset. I think it's really, really important to start any discussion about mixing by thinking about the brain and how you kind of approach it. So I want to ask you all a question, and any of these questions that I ask you, I really urge you, please post your answers in the comments. Let's make this really interactive, because also a lot of the stuff I'm saying here today, they're just ideas, and mixing is an art, right? So we can do it all sorts of different ways. So first of all, first question for you, how do you prep for a mix? What do you do when you're going to prep your mix? Okay, so throw those answers in there and let's see, let's compare notes. Let's see what each other does. Excuse me. So I've got my number 2 point here, is that preparation is key for cultivating flow states. And I think that flow states is really important in things, like mixing. So what I want to do with getting my mindset right by preparing properly, so that when I get into the kind of the creative parts, which is EQ and compression and reverbs and automation and all that kind of stuff, I'm really in a state where I'm responding to the music and to the sound and having ideas and really flowing in this way, not being dragged out of it by some issue with distortion that I don't want, like let's say digital distortion or bad naming, or I can't find a track, or whatever it is. So organizing methodically is super important. That means naming, coloring, grouping, yada yada. I'm not going to explain that more, but it is important, I think. The second thing is to gain stage, and I think a lot of people don't understand what gain staging is. I'm not here to teach you that today because we don't have time, but I have done 3 previous webinars with Adam in the last month, and one of them goes into gain staging in quite some detail. Okay, so we'll get the links to those as well after this webinar. So the next point is setting up references and using them. So setting up references is very important. Let me start with the first thing. Using references is really important. And thinking about, it doesn't have to, some people ask me questions like, how many references should I have? And, whatever, like, should I just have one? Or my answer to that is, I think don't have too many because you can get confused, but no one song is going to be exactly what you want, because then you're just copying, right? But you might go, okay, I really love the drums in this track. I love the way the reverb and the spatial design is on this track. I love the vocals on that track. Do that. Okay, so use your references specifically, and play those songs when you're working on your vocals. Play that vocal reference, to keep you really, really, really on task, I guess. The other really important thing about using references is, and I imagine some of you are just starting, you might not have the developed ears yet, or the developed kind of level of skill to know that you're doing the right thing. So you need a reference to check in. Oh, okay, is my EQ decisions, are they making sense? Are they sounding good in relation to something else really great? Another thing is that often you're going to be mixing in your bedroom or in headphones, and maybe you've got cheap monitors. Maybe you haven't bought those Atom monitors yet. So, in that case, it's really important again to have references to check that your room and your monitoring isn't giving you false information that's making you make bad decisions in terms of your audio processing. So references are important. And then this other one that I said here, the next point is understand the difference between audio processing in mixing and production. So that's one. So the difference for me is that production is about character and arrangement. So it's finalizing the arrangement, the vertical arrangement in terms of the layers, and the horizontal arrangement in terms of how it moves through time and develops and changes. But it's also the sound design. So a lot of people think, okay, so audio processing, like let's give a good example, using a chorus, right? So in production, the chorus effect you'd probably use because you like the sound and the way it warbles and all that kind of stuff. If I'm using chorus in mixing, I want to use it for slight phasing process. It's going to change the dimensional relation of 2 sounds and help me to move them back in the mix so I can place my sounds in the mix. And it shouldn't really be audible to the naked, to the lay person, let's say. So that's the difference. And I think it's really important to understand those two. And of course, particularly these days with, contemporary music, that workflows we often kind of mix while we're producing and stuff like that. If that's you, cool, but just do be clear about what job you're trying to do. It will help you mix better for sure. Okay, so the last 2 is me putting my teacher hat on. And it's really important. Learn how to use your tools. So take time and, have some time that's not like, you're going to release a song. Have a day where you just play with EQ. You use all of the EQs that you have, you experiment with them, and you get to know them and you start to learn it. And, all of the compressors that every engineer sits in their studio and they sit and they play around with all their gear because that's what they love doing, because they're gear freaks, right? But that's how they get good at it, because they really know it. So the same goes for you. You need to do that in your DAW, whatever it is. Learn your tools. And then the final thing is train your ears. So it's at the end of the day, everything I'm going to say is redundant. It's all about the ears. It's the most important thing. If your ears aren't working, you're not going to mix very well. So, how do you do that is another question. So frequency train, it's the same way that a singer trains intonation, or a guitarist learns how to recognize chords, inversions and stuff like that. as engineers, as mix engineers, we need to learn how to recognize frequencies, or we start off with recognizing frequency bands. So there's lots of apps you can use on your iPhone. I used to practice them when I was on the bus, wherever. Get into it. That's the vibe. And that's it. Okay, so get into a mixing mindset. That's the first point. So I'm going to break for a second and see if there's any interesting questions, see where we're going. What do we got here? Okay, so Cole Beats Holmes, what's up? How are you? Says, I get references first, so I know where to start and make sure that the tracks are in a good order for workflow. Nice one. Okay, so starting with the references, I think that's really cool. The idea of like, you get the references are getting you in the mood. I also quite often start my session when I'm setting everything up. I play my references so I can kind of like enjoy, because they're often my favorite tracks, right? So I can enjoy the flow and the feeling, and by the time I get into it, I'm ready to go. Let's see. Hang on, I just lost my comments. So someone says here, if you are in the mixing mindset, the last thing you want is open decisions that the producer, engineer, and artist should have finalized. Let me just understand that. I like that. I guess it's like the idea that you want to just be able to kind of work on the mix. So this is about planning and getting organized and making sure that everything that needs to be done is done. Totally. So yes, I like that. Thanks for that one. Is it Marga? So someone says, Ashwin says, can you elaborate more on referencing, like the workflow? So, okay, the workflow with referencing. Now, I'm not going to give you an example of it today because the way that I set up my referencing when I'm working in the box requires lots of audio routing. And on this stream, if I do that, my computer's going to completely fail. So you have to imagine. So I have Spotify that I use, or Tidal. I actually prefer to use because the quality is better. Then I run the audio from my computer output into Pro Tools by using something like Soundflower or Loopback or whatever. And then I create an auxiliary channel, which is my reference channel, and I have it in my DAW project. And I think that that's a really good idea. If you have like digital files, that's even better. It's even easier. You don't have to worry about all the routing, but a lot of people don't use that these days. So I have it in my DAW, and the really important is that the levels are matched. So my reference has been mastered. It's a lot louder. So it's really important that the level of you get the reference to the same level of your mix, right? So that should be like minus 16 dBFS RMS, approximately. I don't know how many of you are how confident you are with metering, but that's the vibe. So hopefully, Ashwin, that answers it for you. I mean, let me say one more thing to it. How in the workflow, I'm listening to it throughout. So, at the beginning, I'll listen to, if I'm going to do the drums, right? I'll listen to the reference, and then I'll go to my drums and I'll start working on them. I'll work on them for a bit. I'll check in with my reference. And then, particularly if there's something I'm checking that is very detailed, I want to go A-B really quickly between the reference and my track, because if it takes too long, I've forgotten what your brain kind of loses. That's why it's really important to get the references like in the project, if that makes sense. So that you can do these switches. I use a monitor called a big knob monitor if I'm working in the DAW, and I actually route out through my interface sometimes as well. So there's a few ways you can do it. I'll leave it there. Some apps. Sarah Dearlove says, can you recommend some apps? I certainly can. My favorite is simply called Frequency. Hang on, I'm gonna have to get my phone here and see if I can find a few more. Just give me a sec. We have see, I've got a whole folder of them, if you can see. So we have Studio Ears, Hear EQ, Sound. Oh no, that's my sound meter. Oh, they're the two that I'm using. Okay, so can you see that? I don't know if you can see that. Does that focus? Check it out. Anyway, Frequency. Frequency is my hot tip. Nice and easy. So you start off with sine tones, octave displaced sine tones, and then you can go to third octaves, and then you can go to noise, and then you can start to work into filtering in your within your DAW. Hear EQ. Yep, that's one. That works. Cool. Okay, nice one. So let's move on to point 2 now. Point point 2 is consider the workflow that fits you and the music. So what do I mean by that? Well, here's my question, another question to throw out to you. So please don't be shy. I really want to hear how everyone starts and what you think. So just go for it. And let's, particularly the girls up to the front, girls forward, please. Let's hear how you start your mix. So let me show you how I start my mix, or I'll talk a little bit about considering about workflow. So I think that discovery and framing is the really important thing to do first, and I wouldn't decide on my workflow before I'd done discovery and framing. So what is discovery and framing? Discovery and framing is but this is particularly relevant if you were working on a track that you've got from a client. If you're working on your own music, it's slightly less because you already know the track. But discovery means learning the track, playing the track, and figuring out what you've got. So basically, I call it. It sounds a little bit mean, but basically, I say, where are the stars and where are the losers? Which I wouldn't tell my client that necessarily, but the idea is there's always, generally there are 1 or 2 problem areas. So there might be some sounds, like maybe the snare was recorded badly and it doesn't sound good. That happens like a lot. Or maybe the intonation of the bass is a bit weird, or the timing of the bass is a little bit weird, or I don't know. Okay. So find out if there are any problems. Sometimes there are problems in arrangement too. So see if there's any conflicts between the parts. Then I think about the stars, because of course, the mix has got to have some beautiful aspects to it. Otherwise, you probably would have told the client that it's not ready, or not taken the job if it wasn't something that got you excited. So then you look for those beautiful moments and you remember them, and you make sure that you bring them out in the mix. Okay. So after you've been working for 8 hours, those beautiful moments might have gotten lost with you focusing on the kick drum, for an hour and a half or something. Okay. So I find that writing those down and remembering them helps me to reset. And if they're not exciting me anymore, it generally means I need to take a break. So it means close the computer, turn off the monitors, and go outside for a bit and reset. Then it's also framing, is like thinking about what is the song, what genre is the song, what is the intended listening environment? Like, is it for a club? I do lots of like techno and house mixes because I'm a Berliner, so of course there's lots of dance music. Is it a jazz context? Is it for a live? Is it going to be played? Are you doing stems for a live performance, or is it for Spotify? Etc. Is it for CD? So thinking about the different kinds of contexts will also be important. So once I've done that and I've got a sense of my mix, I start to think about my approach. So the approach is, as far as I understand, is bottom up, top down, the foundation elements or the mono elements, or the fourth option is just go with the sounds as you hear them. So bottom up is the way that most people start, right? So bottom up means you start with a kick, and then you work up through the drums, and then you do the bass, and then you do the harmonic instruments. You work up through the harmonic instruments in terms of register from lowest to highest. Then you work on like solo instruments, lead instruments, then guitars, and then you go to vocals, lead vocals, and then you do the backing vocals. And that's really appropriate for some instances, but it's not always appropriate. And I find increasingly that, particularly if I'm doing a pop track where vocals are really fundamentally important, it's better to do a top-down approach, which is you start with the vocals. So you make the vocals amazing, you really take time with them, and then you build the arrangement around those vocals. I particularly found this beneficial because quite often I'd be spending my whole day working, and by the end of the day, when I'm pretty tired, I start working on the thing that's probably the most important thing in the mix. It's not a very intelligent approach. So maybe that's something for you to think about when you're going to approach your mixes. Sometimes if it's jazz, or if it's an ambient, or if it's more classical music, you might not have the pop, that kind of clean arrangement, clean orchestration kind of, guitar, bass, vocals, blah, blah. So in that case, think about what is the most important instrument that drives the narrative. Okay, so sometimes it's a string part. If that's the case, start with that. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Taking breaks is the other thing I think is very, very important. Understanding the dB level and at what level you are going to start to do damage is fundamentally important for your career, for your comfort in life, and also for you to do good work. So definitely don't work more than 2 hours without a break at loud SPL. So about 85 dB is about the loudest that you should be working, or the kind of where you can work consistently for 2 hours. And you can have louder bursts for sure, but they should only be bursts, right? And then absolutely having some moments where you turn the volume down is important. And there's also benefits for mixing low as well. So this is a good one. The final one that I put in here is that regardless of whatever workflow you have, if you hear a problem, fix it when you notice it. That's something that I've also noticed with people, is that when that, again, because there's a lot of information to take in. And when you first start out, you're like, oh, I just give me some guidance as to like, what's my method? And so you get guidance bottom up. You're like, cool, I'm going to mix bottom up. And then you're so busy like trying to just like go systematically from bottom to top that you actually stop listening. And again, coming back to what I said in the beginning, listening is always the most important thing. So if you hear something that you don't like, or something that's annoying you, or it doesn't feel finished, stop, fix it. That's why I would always say that. The other thing to that, which is important to remember, is that if you don't fix it, after time, your brain will go, oh, she's not fixing it. Cool, I guess that's what she meant, so let's just ignore it, and then you'll stop hearing it. Okay, so that's the danger if you don't listen to it. Okay, so that's workflow. So let's see if there's any questions from workflow. What have we got here? Oh yes, whoever, Marga. Is it Marga? Hope I'm saying it right. Marga says, I love all the wisdom in the book, Zen and the Art of Mixing. Absolutely. Zen and the Art of Mixing has been, I love it. I read it a number of years ago, and it's a really easy read. So this is a great tip. Everyone who's listening here, get yourself a copy, check it out. It's a very good read. It's also a nice, maybe I'm showing how much of a geek I am, but it's a nice book to just read casually, on a Sunday kind of thing. It reads very well is kind of what I mean by that. And it's really nice to get away from the computer, like have an actual book in your hand feels really good to me. So check it out. Thank you for that, Margot. Okay, so Ashwin is saying, how important is gain staging and what are its uses, and is it even necessary other than to fix any clipping going on? As just to reiterate what I said there, sorry, I just lost it there, that I've already done a webinar on gain staging. So check that out. Okay, so I can give you full information about it. But to me, gain staging is very, very important. You can mix without it, no problems. But if you want to, it's like as you develop and you get better and better, all of the little details become important. So, back in the day, once upon a time, I also didn't gain stage. And when I started to gain stage, then, my mixes, the quality of my mixes just elevated pretty quickly. Okay. So it's the little details that have a big impact. Yes. Thank you for that. Okay. So what else? Margaret again is saying, now I'm not quite sure if who we've got out there, but please throw those questions. If you're not provided with a rough mix, do you create one up front? So I would always start with a rough mix so if I'm working with a client, I'd always be saying, because they've done something, right? They've been listening to it, to see with everyone, mixes their work, or at least bounces out their work, right? So I've never had a situation where there isn't something. If it's my own projects, the same thing goes. I'm always bouncing something. So I would just say, give me the last version of what you did and send it through. Yep. So Maiko is saying, show us your setup. And I would love to show you my setup, but I'm at Adam HQ, and I had to move over here because my internet is not good enough, and so the quality was pretty bad. Sorry about that. You can check out webinar number 1 on the series that's going to be posted up to Adam, and I'm in my studio. So yeah, I also work in commercial studios a lot. So large format audio consoles, things like SSLs and Neves. I work a lot with those, and just all standard outboard that that is in commercial studios. That's the kind of stuff that I work with, as well as working in the box. Okay, so let's keep on moving. Okay, point 3 is, the third point is to process sounds based on what you hear and not what you want, not just kind of because. So not just doing things without thinking about what the benefit is for it. So I often find that, you know, people will end up with heavy insert effects and they don't necessarily know why they're doing it. They're kind of just doing it. So I think it's really important. So starting off with, when you hear or see issues to fix, you know, if there's good bits in the sound, particularly with EQ, you want to bring those out. Thinking about the aesthetic and the approach, thinking about the genre, and thinking about the client's wishes. Okay, so really, you know, again, it's about being mindful, not just doing stuff. So let's, at this point, I want to have a little bit of a play around with, and I see a couple of cool, good questions there. I'm going to come back to those in a sec. So from Ezgi and Natalia, thank you for those, and I'm going to come back. So let's see how my computer's going. This is my track. Hopefully you can all hear that. Okay, so this track is a kind of a groove-based track. And okay, so let me think about what I can with this track. The important thing was that, so it's got two aspects to it. There's a it's kind of got a groove beat aspect, which is really important to kind of have that laid back kind of funk groove. But then it's also really kind of sensual and like moody. So those are, when I did my discovery of this is really important. These are the two bits, the two things I'm thinking, okay, this is what I want to bring out in the mix. So for me, how did I start and how did I approach this mix? Well, for me, I started bottom. I started with the groove and I really built it up. So I'll just walk you through a little bit of what we've got here. Sorry, it's really slow. It's quite frustrating. So I have 3 kicks. There are 3 kicks in this project, and so I had to decide how I was going to work with those kicks. So let me just play them again. Let's see if this is going to work. I'm just going to mute. Sorry, solo these 3, and let's see. Okay, so that's the combination of my kicks. Now I'm going to solo them. Okay, so hang on, we're hearing things that we shouldn't be hearing here. Apologies for that. So let me fix up a couple of these issues. I'll try that again. Okay, so there's my sub. So with the sub kick, I turned off, I took it down a lot of the tops, and it also had quite a push. So I reduced some of the low, like from 30 hertz, I cut off that. Then I have 2 acoustic kick drums that were recorded. Can hear that. So what I did with that is that I took out everything basically except the click, because it was a front, it was getting the beta of the mic. So I wanted that to be particularly just the clicky bit basically. Then we have the kick out. Okay, so then the kick out is the that's the main character kick that I want. So this is the one that's kind of the loudest in the mix, and then I'm using the sub to bring in that kind of push, and also because it's a sample to kind of get that aggressiveness, and then the kick in is giving me that kind of like analog or acoustic drum click that's on the top. Cool. So that's one example. Now what else have I got here? I'll play the drums by themselves. Let me just select them again. Yeah, okay, here we go. Okay, so you can hear that I've also got quite a lot of room in the drums. Now that was, again, this is a decision here, is that I wanted it to be, I wanted that roomy vibe because I wanted it to feel like live. I wanted to get that sense that there was someone actually playing it in the room. And Sarah, I just noticed this out of the corner of my eye. Sarah's asking, did I have a person drumming this? And I absolutely did. So this is all recorded as live drums. And then I'm now mixing it. And one of the other things is that it's not supposed to sound like an acoustic funk band. It's supposed to sound kind of contemporary R&B that is kind of hybrid, I guess. So this is a challenge for me with these drums, is to try and find the best out of both of the kind of analog aspects and then the electronic aspects. Yeah. So further on to that, then I also have some other loops and percussion that I've got going. I'll just put those in 1 sec. Okay, let's hear these. Okay, which is not too much. It's just some shakers and extra stuff. This just brings that in a little bit. Cool. So those are my drums, and getting the groove for those. Basically the drums are recorded really well. Then the production was about getting the drums to be in time and to really have the right groove. So for me, and this is a really important point that I want to bring forward, which is what I'm saying here. Only fix the issues when they're there. If you look at my drums here, look at my inserts, there's not that much. So I've done quite a bit of work on the kicks, but the rest of them, I'm just letting them live. Like, they're cool. They sound amazing. Just like let it be. I've done a little bit of work on the overheads just to kind of craft the sound somewhat. And then other than that, we're good to go. Okay. So I think that's a really important thing to remember is don't, if it's not broke, don't, what is it? If it ain't broke, don't try and fix it. I think that's the one. Okay, cool. Now, I want to talk about an issue that I had here, which was, now I've got my bass, hopefully soon. There we go. Now I'm just going to mute some things because things are sounding weird. Oh yeah, I've got some effects coming through. Okay. A few other weird things coming through. Sorry, everyone. Just give me a sec. Okay. So this bass was not cutting through in the mix properly. So what I did here was I decided to create an octave. So this is something that the producer didn't do. I used a thing called a sound shifter and I pushed it up an octave. So let's hear what that does. Oh, I have to wait for a just pregnant pause while we wait for it to get to the bit where the bass starts. Any minute now. Here we go. Okay, so you can hear the difference of those. That just helped me. And what I'm doing here is I'm bringing in, if you understand the harmonic series, I'm bringing in the first overtone, the first octave overtone. So it doesn't sound like a harmony. It's just fitting in with the timbre of the bass to help it cut through at that frequency range. So that's the vibe. Now, what else have we got? I talked about, so that's basically the groove. So if I play those two together, hang on a second. Okay, so and as I'm hearing it now, I'm feeling like it's a little bit too roomy. I'd probably back off that room because it feels like a little bit too much. But, maybe I made that decision because when the rest of the tracks come in, we lose that room. But anyway, that's the vibe. So the next thing is looking at the keys and looking at the Atmos. So if I just solo that, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the reverbs that I used.
It started on Sunday, a day and a half from growing old, a heart full of yarning, a head full of stories to be told. I'll take the train.
Cool. Okay. So as I said, I want it to be kind of sensual and kind of moody and nostalgic. So the types of of reverbs and verbs that I've gone for are very specific. So I have opted for vintage style reverbs that the vintage style tend to roll off the high end, such as this one. Have a sneak peek here. Oh, it's on my other screen. Just wait for a sec. Okay, so Valhalla Vintage Verb. This is one of my favorite reverbs. It's so good, really cheap as well, and it's just a beautiful sounding one. Most engineers I know use this, they're obsessed with it. So I use something that is called a chorus space. So the again, this chorusy thing for this kind of wobbly, woozy kind of feeling. I picked that particularly. I have a high cut at 8,000 hertz because a lot of the old digital reverbs and stuff only go up to about 7,000 or 8,000 before they lose the top frequency, and I like that. I don't have any low cut because I want it to, to have that low feeling. And it's, 4 seconds is kind of medium long, I guess. Okay, so that was my decision for the vocals to really get that wooziness. I also used an 1/8 delay reverb with not much feedback, but I'm sending it back into my ambience. So the delay gets washed back into the reverb. And I also have kind of modulated it a little bit. Oh, that modulation is reset, but normally the modulation is like that. So it's going to slightly pitch like an old tape machine would slightly warble and move the pitch around. And that also works really well to get that feeling that I'm going for. So again, coming back to the point that I said before, I'll put this back up again. Sorry, where am I? Okay, so coming up before, aesthetic and approach. Okay, so really thinking about what am I doing and why am I doing it? I think that's super key to have a plan. And this is coming back to the whole thing about the mixing mindset. Like, what are you doing and what are you trying to create here? I think that's really important, and that informs all of the decisions that I'm doing. Okay, now let's stop for a little second, answer some questions. Milton loves Valhalla. Yay. Absolutely. Yes, definitely good. So what have we got here? We've got Natalie says, I'd love your thoughts on going from the technical side of the mix to the emotional side. How do you make someone feel something with the song? Okay, that's a really good one. I mean, I think that my answer to that is every single technical decision has come from an emotional, there's something that is guided, again, it's basically what I was saying before. Why are you doing it? If I'm doing the kick drum and I want it to be punchy and aggressive, well, that's an emotional, I'm transferring. I want the listener to feel that punch and that energy. So that my answer to this is that you're in tune with the emotional narrative of the song and what the intention is, or what the intention you want it to be. And then when you go and you do technical things, you're trying to feel that for yourself. If you feel that the kick is aggressive, that's the idea, is that then hopefully someone else thinks and feels the same way you do, right? So hopefully that's answered that for you. Mayoko says, are you mixing with headphones? Don't do us like that, please. No way, man. or lady or person. I am not mixing in headphones. I am today. Lovely Adam HP5s, whatever. Bit of product placement there. Sorry, I just saw a few different things in the chat distracting me there. I would not recommend mixing in headphones unless you have to. So I have a studio where I work, and I have, acoustic treatment, and I also have Adam S3V monitors that I use. And, my room has been optimized for mixing. So it's really important that you do that. Ultimately, if you want to be a mix engineer, right? But so people that are starting out might not be able to do that. So then you can get monitors and you can do some simple adjustments and things to your room. You can learn about fairly easily about how to move your monitors and to get a better result. You can also, there's software that helps kind of equalize your room. And headphones, if you really can't, if your room is really terrible or you have neighbors or problems with bass, of course you have to mix in headphones sometimes. No problem. If you are someone that has to mix in headphones like all the time, I really would encourage you to spend, a couple of $100 on getting proper, like really good headphones. I obviously here as a representative of Adam endorse these headphones. I'm not here to say one brand is necessarily better or worse. I think that you should check out your go to a store and try them out, and you'll find stuff that works for you. Go with your gut, go with what feels good. That's what it's all about at the end of the day. Okay. So another person is asking about gain staging. Ben says, how do you approach gain staging? Okay, I think I should say something about gain staging. I didn't really want to, but I'm going to, because that's what I'm here for, is to help out. Okay, so gain staging is the way that I approach gain staging is very methodical. So I have a VU meter. You see that? Yep. So my VU meter is on my master. And if I play my track here, I'll just, yep.
We started on Sunday, day and a half from growing old.
Okay, so my mix is I'm wanting it to kind of generally to be on or around hitting the 0 point. So for me, when I'm looking at that, I think that I could, my drums probably want to hit a little bit more. I'd still want to work on that a little bit more. But when it comes in, the bass and the vocals still have a little bit of overlap. So anyway, this is a mixing process. So the idea is that my VU, I want it to be ultimately all the tracks in to be hitting about 0. So when I'm starting to gain stage, I bring in all my tracks, I press play, and I put the VU on the master and I see what's going on. Generally speaking, it's like a redlining. So because we all kind of work hot, and the way that the doors are set up, it encourages us to like have really loud levels. So what I then do is I go and I trim. So you can maybe see this. I've had to flatten a lot of my tracks. I've got one that's still active here. Okay, so I use the trim tool in Pro Tools, and then I go through and I turn everything down. So if I was in an analog on a desk, I use the trim buttons at the top and I just trim it all down. Sometimes you can do clip gain automation like in Ableton and stuff like that. You can also go directly into the digital file and turn it down. That's totally fine as well. The idea is that at the end of the day, all of your tracks, when you're back on your master, they're all the combined sound of them is not going beyond that 0 point, right? As I said before. Now that 0 point, now this is an important thing, is about maintaining unity once you've got your gain staging, is that I then, when I'm going to be adding any other plugins or processes or compression or EQ or whatever, it shouldn't change from that initial gain stage setting. I mean, it'll change a little bit, but that's the idea, is that I set it, the levels, and then I maintain unity. I maintain the levels throughout my mix, so that it's, so it doesn't get too wild. And it's important to keep on checking on this meter in the master as I go through my mix, because naturally I'm going to boost things, get a bit excited, and boost too much of my kick drum or whatever it might be. So that's what I do. That's how I gain stage. Hope that answered the question. So Mayoko, maybe look, I'm going to keep on going. I'll come back to a few more questions about a few more questions that we've got here at the end. So let's go back into my next points. Okay, so my next point is, what is all the fuss about routing? So basically with routing, I think it's important as part of the creative decision. So if you're just starting out and routing is confusing to you, don't worry about it. It's not an issue. To me, I think that there's 3 reasons for grouping sounds. One is that you want to employ group processing. So let's say all of my drums, my acoustic drums, I want to ultimately put a compressor over all of those drums like as one unit. So the reason for doing that, so they're going to move together and kind of get a bit more glue, let's say. So I would group them into a subgroup, and that's part of my routing. Another reason that I would group sounds is if at the end of the day, for like ease, if I'm going to be bouncing stems. So I would create different subgroups that I can solo, or I can route to different outputs so I can bounce my stems all at once. That's just a practical thing. And the other way is just like literally for ease of workflow, for muting and soloing, so that whatever works for your taste. So there's a few different, there's as many mix engineers that there's many different ways that people route. People like, Andrew Sheps has a really particular routing for his parallel processing and the Browerization, and on it goes. There's lots of different people. Okay, so I think that for me, thinking about group processing and what you're wanting to do, that's a reason for routing to me. So hopefully that answers it. I'll show you a little quickly about my routing organization here. Sorry for that gravelly noise. That's my mouse running on the desk. Okay, so we have here for me, I've got 3 my master subgroups, and on this mix it is drum and bass. I mix the drum and the bass together because I really feel like the bass, it's an 808 bass and they're kind of working together. Then I have all of my keys and then I have vocals. So I only needed 3 subgroup stems in this particular mix, but sometimes I might have up to 6. The other thing that to note about my routing is that if you remember from before, I have my kick drums. I've summed those to a subgroup because I wanted to process them. So once I've done the EQ and adjustments on them, then I wanted to compress them together. And then I have also my snares and rims are also grouped together. Okay, so that's my process in routing. A lot of people kind of ask me about that, so I think that's important to talk about. Cool. All right. Now let's see where we're at. Now time, as it does, moves pretty quickly. So now I want to talk about a few EQ tips. I'm going to give you some EQ tips and some compression tips as well. So the EQ tips are, I think it's really important to learn to connect sound recognition with frequency and in terms of number. So that means like when you hear a sound like ee, that you go, oh, that sounds like it's about 1.2k or something, or woo, that's maybe that's about 200 hertz. So or the what's that frequency, right? So to start to learn those, there's a few ways you can do it. One is to get books. The Mix Engineer's Handbook by Bobby Winsky is amazing. There's quite a few. There's many you can go and check out. The Zen and the Art of Mixing doesn't really give you these particular EQ tips like the Mix Engineer's Handbook does, for example. But I would go. That's my hot tip for getting some initial kind of like cheat sheets on EQ. Okay, that's where I'd head to. And my third point here is create a cheat sheet when you're starting out. So about, if you're mixing lots of drums, then really zone in on learning the kind of frequency areas with the drums. So for example, what is the frequency of the boomy, the sub part of the kick drum? What is the part where you kind of often get muddiness and that you want to cut it out because it's a bit like kind of boxy? What's the bit of the kick drum, which is the knock? Those of you doing hip hop, the knock part you want to bring out. What is the, whatever, okay, you get the vibe. What's, for example, I do lots of female vocals. So there's often a particular part of female vocals, particularly mezzo-sopranos, where it gets when they go into their high range or their belt, where it can sound tight and problematic. And that's 3,500 hertz for anyone out there. So I'm always aware of that. I learned that. I heard it lots and then I figured out what the number was and I wrote it in a cheat sheet until I remembered it. Okay, so I think that's really important. Training your ears, I've already said about this and I will say it again. I think it's really important. It's really easy. It's kind of fun if this is who you are. And it is going to just, when you start to be able to recognize these, it feels really good and it helps you just to get better and faster. Okay, so they're the general things. So coming into when you're actually doing processing, I want to say, so this one says, before boosting, consider if you wouldn't get the same result by cutting. Okay, so quite often when people start out, they go, I want more of this, I want more of that, I want more of that, I want more of that. And you just boost. And what that ends up doing is you're kind of creating more noise. Essentially, you're just adding frequency and there's no space for it to go. So oftentimes people will say it's not bassy enough. And so I will kind of look and say, is it too trebly? Maybe you cut out the treble, then the bass sits through really nicely. So just consider that sometimes. My kind of approach is that I like to consider the difference between transparent EQs and character EQs. So like a transparent EQ is something like a stock, like the Fab Filter or the F6 by Waves, or the, any like Ableton EQ8, channel EQ in Logic or the Dyne 3 EQ in Pro Tools. So those, I use those for specific reasons, and they're generally to kind of like to clean things up. I'm generally doing cuts with my transparent EQs. This is my flow, right? I'm not saying this should be you, but I'm giving you some tips of how I approach things. And then with when I'm wanting to do boosts and like kind of really bring out different kind of tones, I'm often using what I call character EQs. So often these are emulations, things like the Pultec EQs or SSL EQs or Neve or API or Harrison or anything like that. Okay, so that's my tip for that. And then what do I say here? Play around with placement in the signal chain. Oh, yeah. Cool. Okay, so a lot of people go, should I just have EQ then compression or compression then EQ? Well, it's a redundant question. It depends. Sometimes EQ first and then compression. So let's say why I would have EQ first is if I heard that there were some problems in the sound that I wanted to clean up, kind of get rid of before I kind of started to think about the dynamic contour. That's when I do EQ first. Sometimes I have the sounds really good, and then I EQ it, and then I want to kind of boost out or bring out or subtly change some of the characters after compression. Then I'm going to EQ after the compressor. Okay, it's as simple as that. Okay, cool. Let's see if we've got any questions. So cool. Okay, nothing really about EQ there. So that's cool. I'm going to keep on going because I am kind of slightly behind. Okay. So number 6 is compression tips. Okay, so if you're going to use presets, which I know a lot of people do, that's no shade, like go for it. I don't think you should only use presets because you'll never kind of learn and figure out your own flow, but it's no problem to use presets. However, if you're using presets, you absolutely still must set the threshold yourself, because the preset doesn't know how loud or soft the signal is that it's getting. Okay, so just really remember that. And the second point to that is to know the difference between like a small amount of compression, a medium amount of compression, and a lot of compression. So does anyone want to dive in on the comments? Like, what is considered a lot of compression? How many dB gain reduction should you be getting if you're compressing a lot? Let's see what you answer. The next one is to learn the different types of compressors. So I think like understanding the difference between an optical compressor and a FET compressor and a VCA compressor. I think that has been really helpful to me because they have a different sound, they have a different vibe, and I'm going to use the different compressors based on different jobs that I might have. So yeah, here I said sometimes EQ might get you better results before compression. I find that a lot of people like dive really into compression and oftentimes maybe overdo it. So sometimes EQ and a gate might be a better job than just compressing it. So the way that I can give you practical advice for this is when you're compressing, if it's not working, it's not getting the result that you want, compression probably isn't the answer. So stop trying with the compression and try something else. Also, okay, so the fourth point here is that if you have an inconsistent signal, do gain reduction first with the vocals. This often happens with vocals, so you gain reduce before you go into the compressor so it evens it out. Now, I can give you an example of this. If we go over to my track, let's check out the vocals. Okay, so we have my lead vocal. I'm just going to solo this. It's just got a little minute before it starts up, I think.
It started on Sunday.
Okay, if I'm just going to turn off.
A day and a half from growing old, a heart full of yearning.
Okay. Now, I use Melodyne, and I use Melodyne to do my automation, to kind of manage my amplitude as well as pitch and time. So if I turn that off, now let's see my compressor here.
It started on Sunday, a day and a half from growing old.
Okay, so just there, do you see?
Full of yearning.
The growing old went to 5 dB.
Here full of stories to be told. I'll take the train.
Okay, so there were some moments there where it really worked quite hard and others where it wasn't even catching. So to get the better result out of your compressor, it's better to kind of manage those levels a little bit more. And let's see, I'm going to see if I make a liar out of myself, that to kind of control some of those loudness so that the compressor is working more consistently. Let's see what we got.
It started on Sunday.
Yeah. Okay. So you see it's working more.
A day and a half from growing old. A heart full of yearning.
So the growing is still perhaps a little bit loud there.
Stories to be told. I'll take.
Okay, so but you can hear that the lower, what I did with the automation in Melodyne, I can hear that I brought up the quiet things rather than turning down the loud things because I thought it sounded good. I brought up the quiet things that were not hitting the compressor so that it was all being compressed and it sounds better. Cool. Okay. Now, the final point, I'm not going to put it back up because I'm going to stay in Pro Tools, but the final point I have here is smaller stages of compression often work better than one heavy-handed use of compression. Okay, now this is a good point because you can see it here. Oh, where's my... Okay, so I have on my signal chain for my lead vocal, you can see that I have my de-esser, then I have my compressor here, then I have another EQ, then I have another compressor. So I've got, and I'll put these both up so you can see them. 1 and 2, so they're going on my other screen. Okay, so I'm using two really famous emulations. The 1176 is in the top and the 2A is at the bottom, the LA2A. So the first one is the FET and it's a fast compressor. It reacts quickly and I wanted to use that to catch the transients and to be a little bit more energetic, right? Then I used, after I'd done all of my signal chain, I finally put it through the LA2A, which is smooth. It's an optical, so it's really smooth and gradual and a bit more velvety and a bit, so to kind of like smooth out the part. When I did that because I wanted thinking about my, the vibe of the track. But this is a really common approach. And you see that I'm not really getting over, 5 dB is probably quite a lot. So I think I saw here someone put down 5 dB is a lot. 6 dB is probably thinking about quite a lot of gain reduction. And then I have a small amount of compression on the second one. Let's see that. The LA2A should only be going to like 1 dB, hopefully. If it's going more, I've not.
It started on Sunday.
Okay, just touching just a little bit.
A day and a half from
Probably have it up a little bit more.
A heart full of yearning. A hair full of stories to
yeah, that's probably where I'd want it to be. Okay.
I'll take the train.
Okay, so some small stages of compression often work better than one heavy-handed use. Cool. Okay. Now we're going to, so some spatialization tips is the next point. I think with spatialization, there's like, these 4 points. One is that really think about spatialization in mixing, not necessarily in production. I think generally it works better in parallel because we are often trying to get a sense of depth and dimension. The second thing is to have a spatial plan or concept. I've been talking about this a lot today. So what do you want to do? Quite often I see people and they want this really warm kind of vintage sound and then they use a really cold metallic plate. It's like you're not thinking, that doesn't work. It doesn't make sense. Okay. So thinking about the design with how you're going to be choosing your different reverbs and plates and all that kind of stuff. So then 2 other things about when you're going to be processing actually in your DAW. This is a really great point that someone said to me a couple of years ago. So if you want something to stick out of the mix, so to kind of bring itself out, you want that not to be timed to the BPM. So slightly take it off the sync and then slightly move the milliseconds a little bit and it will stick out more. And if you want it to blend, make sure you think about timing. And that goes for reverbs as well. It's like pre-delay and the decay length of reverbs. So thinking about that, that's a hot tip there. And then the final one to think about spatialization is that when you're using delays that are really messy and bounce around a lot, I think it's much better to automate what we call a throw. So a throw is that you only send the effect on certain notes. Okay, so that then you're going to keep it clean so it doesn't clog up the mix. All right. Now, as we're kind of almost out of time, I'm just going to go to my final point, which is to thinking about story and narrative and how it's the idea is ultimately, so mixing, we can get really caught up on the technical processes and EQ and compression and optimization, all that kind of stuff, that sometimes the thing that's missing from the mix is humanity, is the emotion, and is the life again. Sometimes you can mix the life out of a track. I've certainly done it back in the day. So, and it's particularly something to be aware of when you're learning. So how do we make sure that we're not going to mix the life out? Well, take breaks. I've already said that. If you're doing all these things that I'm saying, like really checking in and really being mindful about why you're doing what you're doing, that's the first step. The second thing is, so after there's some technical things you can do. So remembering that, you tension and release, you're trying to create tension and release. I think that transitions are really, really important. And so I call it, or I think my composition mentor back in the day when I was studying said, it's about composing the joins. So you often spend more time on the join, on the transition from the chorus than you do on the whole chorus. I mean, maybe that's an exaggeration, but hopefully you get what I'm saying there. Okay, so really think about those transitions, because if the transition doesn't hit, it doesn't hit. You got to keep on working. There's no way the song doesn't work if the transitions don't hit properly. Also, with that, if you have your verse is too loud for the chorus, well, your transition's not going to hit. So thinking about building the loudness of your track over time is also really important. And also, if you have your first chorus already like really pumping, well, where's your third chorus going to go? Okay, so thinking about leaving yourself some space to build excitement. And then also, obviously, with this is don't be afraid to automate the volume levels. So that's like the final thing when you're mixing. And if you're mixing analog, when you go to do an actual live mix, it's like a performance almost, right? So you're in the track, in the music, and you'll react and move some of the faders up and down as you feel it. There's no reason why you shouldn't do that with the DAW as well, okay? So you can automate them, you can draw them in, whatever. But definitely this really helps to create that sense of tension and aliveness in the mix. Whew. All right. So that's it. That's all I have for you today. Let's check in on those questions, and maybe Yvette will join us again.
Hey.
See where we're at. Hello.
Hey.
Hello.
How you doing?
Good.
Sorry, I made it small there. Yeah, we've had some brilliant questions, some brilliant feedback. It's such a huge topic though, isn't it?
It is, yeah. No, it's massive.
In like an hour, but then to break them down, we will be doing like from the amazing response we've had from this 6-part series, and we're only 2 in, is that we continue. So we will be doing them, on a regular basis through Adam Audio, and we will be delving into the specifics then as well. So do let us know in the comments what specifics of mixing you really want to get into, and we'll get Jane back again for those things. But for now, I did notice a really good question before, and I'm going to go find it now. It was earlier on in your chat. Here we go. It's from Hakita. Is there any advice you can give to all the female engineers? It feels like 99% of the tour are played by men.
Yes, they are. They absolutely are. And that's because, the guys have been out there and doing it for a lot longer in mass than females. So it's just the way it is. And there's amazing, amazing content there. Just because it's guys doesn't mean it's bad content. It's really good. So use what's out there. There's also a lot of people that are creating more kind of female content. There's a platform called MPW, Music Production for Women, and they're creating blogs and content and stuff like that. So please check them out. There's a few. I have a plan to create content and do different tutorials, but life somehow keeps me too busy. But I'm going to really try and also contribute in that way. All people that are listening out there, create your own tutorials. Like get up there, even if you think it's silly. You learnt that tool, and someone probably will benefit from it. So a silly little thing about how to set up your, I don't know, you learn a cool trick with your compressor, do a little YouTube tutorial, whack it up online. You'll definitely have people that will appreciate it. So just go for it. Don't be scared like I am or like I was. Okay, so go for it. Now, advice that I could give to all the female engineers. My main advice is to be bold. I think just to go out there and just to really go for it. So, ask what I mean by that can be that can mean nothing or everything. So what I mean by that is find people to work for. So offer your services for free at the beginning if you need to get some experience. Just write to people on Instagram and just say, hey, I'm an engineer, I'd love to record your band. Hey, I'd like to do a mix for you. If you don't like it, cool, but like send me the stems and I'll give a go at it. Like just build up and just get in there and just try and learn. And then the other thing is to do, as I've already said a million times, do your homework, learn your tools, do your ear training, like do lots of analysis of the songs you love. That's what, that's the other thing. The answers are all there in all of the beautiful music out there. So yeah, that's my advice. And just go for it.
I am on that note as well. It's how did you start? Like, what was your entry into it all?
My entry was kind of twofold. So in the late 90s, I discovered like electronic music and started raving and all that kind of stuff. And then I went to I in my school had a like a electronic music studio that no one went to. It was all dusty, and I kind of found out about it, and I went in there and started kind of playing around with like Logic 2.5 and, like banging around. And then in a couple of years later, I save some money, whatever. I got Logic. Back then it cost $2,500 or something. It was ridiculous. But so I got my own studio and then I kind of mucked around with that. And then eventually I went and studied music. I got into classical music and I studied composition. And then I just had this crave of like gear and that's kind of stuff. So I got an internship at a fairly large commercial studio in Australia called BJB. I interned there. Then I ended up on Australian Idol. I was engineering for Australian Idol, met Cyndi Lauper and like just some other had some amazing.
Was that just a case of being in the right place at the right time?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I have a funny story about the whole Cyndi Lauper thing. I was actually the assistant, and then the engineer walked out or something, and then they were like, right, you're it. And I didn't know what the hell I was doing. It was an SSL G series, and it was a 120, it was a massive, massive, massive console. And it looked like a air cockpit, like it looked like.
It was like really jumping into the deep end. Like, I found that a lot of the women or anyone that works in the music industry, but a lot of the women that I speak to, it's a case of saying you can do it before you can do it.
100%. That is the story of my life. I'm like, yeah. And then I'm like, oh, okay, right. How do I figure this out?
You're not going to fail, are you? You won't fail because you're then going to force yourself to learn.
Totally.
Quicker.
I mean, look, I've got to say I failed like plenty of times, but it's not, I think that's the point is it's, failing, if you pick up and get through it, it doesn't matter, so, but generally speaking, you find a way through it. Yeah.
That's cool. That's really good advice. Literally, so it's half being like, giving your time, learning for free, giving your time to people for free, but also like kind of just getting stuck in there. Like you said, it raves, like the odd spaces where you find yourself comfortable, just putting yourself out there. And then also education as well. So there is an element of actually having to learn from the textbook too.
I think so. I mean, if not from a textbook, like everyone's different. Some people are not into textbook, but I think like learn is in practice, like play around with your DAW, fiddle with stuff. Like, as I said, play around with the EQ or just like hone your skills in whatever way floats your boat, let's say, whatever it is, just like spend the time. Yeah.
Sure. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So let's see what questions we have here. This is a good one, Kitty Turner. Do you have any recommendations for getting to grips with compression, especially for spoken word?
Yeah, Kitty, cool question. Compression is a really hard one. People really struggle with the theoretical concepts of it. I'm not going to try and explain it to you right now because I'll probably make it more confusing. I would suggest that there's actually a really good one called Mixing with Your Mind. Check it out. He has a really good explanation of how to set a compressor. So that's one thing I can send to you. Compression, I think, with spoken word, the best kind of practical tip I could give you is what I kind of briefly said before, is to do automate and balance like with your editing process to kind of normalize the levels. So basically, if there's things that you can't hear that are getting lost, bring them up before you use the compressor. So the compressor should be kind of working in a similar kind of way. If it goes like boof and works too hard, the compressor is probably not being optimized. So that's the first thing. Then the next thing I can say is if you, for attack and release, attack is if you want to control the transients, if you want all that stuff, if you need to change it, if it's too bitey or it annoys you, fast attack. If you want to bring out the warmth and you want to get more of the resonance to be more kind of full or present, then you would have a slower attack to bring up the body. Then with release, it's more about the flow of the rhythm of the words or the track. So the release should, if I'm doing something groovy, my release is going to be like that. If I'm doing techno, boof, 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 right? So the energy, the release is going to be reacting to the energy of the track. Hopefully that helps. Okay, good luck.
Good answer. Really good answer. Good question, a good answer. Have we got anything else here? Let's have a look. So we've lots of really good feedback. Lots of people loving your presentation, James. That's awesome.
Yay, nice one. Thank you everyone for listening.
It's great. It's great to have this kind of feedback live as well. What is that? My eyes are going funny. Would using Waves vocal rider help?
Yeah, that's a great one, Hikita. Nice tip. So Waves Vocal Rider, anyone who doesn't know what it is it automates what I was saying about doing the manual adjustment to the lows and the highs. So absolutely, you can use Waves Vocal Rider to bring up the lows and bring down the highs. One of the things, I mean, for me, I'm old school and I'm also a bit of a control freak, and I'm a bit like, I don't know, I just like to do it manually. So I want to get in there and know exactly what's going on. However, absolutely, Vocal Rider really works. There is a little bit of a learning curve with Vocal Rider. It's not massive, but you do need to take a little minute to understand the parameters in it. Yeah. Nice tip.
Nice one. Cool. So was there any other questions that you spotted along the way, Jane?
I think there was one or two. Just realized I'm almost in darkness here, so I didn't turn on the light, and I didn't.
It got darker there, yeah, because you're an hour ahead.
Yeah,
aren't you?
yeah.
Berlin, so
yeah, it's 8:15, so I'm like moody Berlin vibes is what I'm bringing right now. So sorry about that. What else have we got here? So Margot did a good one before. It's kind of at 7:55 mark. He said, "Do you consider cuts as a fix for problems and boosts for sweetening?" And I think that's a really good way to describe it. I like that. So, often the cuts are, I'm cutting out things that don't, if I hear something that's not working. So like there's a nasal tone in the voice I don't like, or the kick drum sounds boxy, I'll put out like 400 hertz. And then the boosts are, if I'm hearing something that I go, oh, I really want to bring out more of the air of the vocal, boost it up. I want more of the subbiness of the kick, boost the sub of the kick. Yep, definitely. That's a good one. What else have we got? There's a good one from Mayoko 746. It's she says, or they say, what plugins do you use on your master track? That's a really good one. So I can show you that. I'll tell you first and then I can show you later. Yeah. So I use always two plugins. Number one is my bus compressor, and I always use SSL G-Bus compressor because I absolutely love it. I always use it when I'm in an analog studio, and I always then translate it to an emulation when I'm at home or not at home, in my home studio or whatever. So I use it, for my bus compression, and then I have my VU meter after that because I gain stage into my bus compressor. Again, that's a topic for another time, perhaps. And then sometimes I will put a kind of what I would call a character EQ afterwards. Sometimes it's an API. Sometimes it's a Neve. It would really depend, or the Kush ones I really like. It would really depend on the vibe. So I use Neve if I'm doing like a more gritty kind of like maybe a 70s vibe, or if I'm doing like rock. I'll use an API if I'm doing something more pop and more high end. I'll do SSL if it's like kind of a bit more clean and kind of aggressive. So it can change. And then I have a limiter only for when I'm bouncing out, when I want to listen back. So I move up the level, but I have the limiter is always off until it's just there for convenience when I'm going to bounce out my mixes to listen. So I hope that helps. Yeah. I think we might have a few new comments down there.
Yeah, the isolate. That one. We talked about that before, didn't you? But should we go back to it look quickly again?
Oh, yeah, cool.
Yeah.
So, and then this is, again, so how important is your room treatment for you for mixing? It's really, 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 really important. The thing of it is, right, so I've come from being, mixing at home, mixing in speakers, mixing in my bedroom, mixing in all different environments, to working in home studios, then working in more level studios, then working in professional commercial environments, and then everything in between. It doesn't stop you from mixing if you don't have good treatment in your room. It just makes mixing about 1,000 times harder. So it's much more laborsome. So what I can say to you now is that I have a really well-treated room, and I just have fun with mixing, and I don't second guess myself, because I know it sounds, the way I hear it is the way it is, the end, right? So I think it's super important. But, like, it's a stage that we all go through. So some of you probably can't afford to put the money in yet, or maybe you don't want to make your room look like a studio because you want to live in it. So you can make adjustments and things that can work within the stage that you're at. I think monitors are very important. So particularly if you can have like near field monitors, you're getting the direct signal, and your room can kind of be taken out to a certain degree. So even if you're at home, getting to know a little bit about how you can move and position your speakers in a way that you can optimize your room is important. So know your room and monitors, yes, and definitely would probably be needing to do a little bit of treatment regardless of the room that you're in.
Cool. That's good. That summarised that well. I know that a lot of the companies actually give really good PDFs and highlights on how to actually treat your own room without actually having just the monitors, and with the actual kind of distancing between your, to measure your walls and the distancing and the bounce backs and stuff like that. So it's good with whatever monitors you have to check out what your product, what they offer in terms of on their website for information. I'm sure Adam Audio do as well. So yeah,
absolutely. In the manuals, there's information about placement. So yeah, it's easy stuff you can check out online. Yeah, real good.
Good stuff. I think we're coming to the end now. So I just want to thank you, Jane. It's been awesome to have you. And where can everyone find your other sessions? Like where can they find you online?
Well, you can go to janearnison.com. That's my website. You can also find me on Spotify. I think janearnison.com links to some of the work that I've done, so you check that out. And as I said at the beginning, I have a band called Evol. That's all my work. You can definitely check that out. Lots of projects in the works at the moment as well. So, and
then your kind of tutorials, are they on your website as well, or are they on your socials?
No, I don't really have tutorials yet. That's the thing. I've been too busy with everything else, but it's kind of on the plan. The tutorials will be coming up on the Pathways website, I'd say early in 2021. Yeah, the tutorials that I have done recently that I've been referring to in this session, I did with Adam Audio. So they are going to be put on the Adam YouTube page like in the next week or two. Awesome. So just, if people are interested in that, there's been quite a few questions about gain staging. So those of you really check that session out. Everyone that came to the session said it was really helpful. So I hope that it will also be helpful for you.
That's awesome. So if everyone who's watching now, if you're not subscribed to Adam Audio on YouTube, click the subscribe so you'll get notifications when new videos go up and when we go live again. On Facebook, obviously follow Adam Audio on there too, and there in the event listings there's all the next events that are coming up. We've got 4 more left. So thanks, Jane. Thank you very much.
Cool. Thanks a lot.
It's been awesome having you, and thanks to everyone that's joined us. Just to remind you that we've got the sessions, we've got 4 more coming up every Thursday at 1 p.m. in US, it's 6 p.m. BST, which is UK, and then obviously 7 p.m. in Europe, and going forward like that, the time zones wise. And also the next one we have is Mastering with Kate Davini. We've got the one after that. Yeah, it'll be really good. If there's more of a Q&A, it's an interview with. Cool. So that'd be really cool, really interactive. And then after that, we have a really good panel of lots of women in A&R and management. So if any of you that want to know how you actually approach, an A&R, an agent or a management company to help promote your music or get your music to the next stage. After that is marketing and branding. And then the final one, we've got some amazing guest speakers. So you can check all that out on the Adam Audio Facebook. There will be a link going up as well very shortly for you to sign up for reminders, which is a good way to not miss these sessions. And they will be replayed online afterwards too. And then also, don't forget the competition that we're running all the way through the series. With some awesome software. And maybe some nice speakers as well, some nice monitors.
Yes, absolutely. Cool.
Yeah, so thanks everyone for joining in. Do give us your feedback. As always, it's been lovely to have you, and we will see you next time. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Ciao.